Oh, good evening, everybody. I'm Bill Handley. I'm District Councillor for the villages of Over and Willingham and the lead cabinet member for communities at South Cambs District Council. I'd like to welcome you to this Cambridge East Community Forum. It's the second one of 2022. And in common with those held in Northwest Cambridge and North East Cambridge, this is a place for information sharing, receiving updates, and a chance to get to know those people who are helping to shape the new communities in the area. The forums facilitated by South Cambridgeshire District Council, Cambridge City Council, and the Greater Cambridge Shared Planning Service. We have alternating chairs and it's my turn this evening. Now, some people here have been engaged with the development of the sites for quite a long time, and others are relatively new to the forum. And we welcome all questions and we'll do our best to answer them. However, there are questions, if there are questions that we can't answer, we'll provide a written response on the forum website that everyone can see. It's important to note that this forum is not part of the formal planning process. If you wish to formally comment on live planning applications, you should do so via the Greater Cambridge Shared Planning Service website. The forum's been recorded and will be shared on the forum. By staying with us, we'll assume that you'll consent to being a part of it. Now, we will hear this evening presentations from key developers and others associated with the new communities at Marleigh, on land north of Cherry Hinton and land south of Coldham's Lane. We also have a number of non-presenting panellists here that support the planning infrastructure such as transport and education, and they're available to respond to any questions on those topics. Now, to save time, I'm not going to introduce all of these panellists now, but if I could just suggest that they switch on their cameras now for a minute or two so that people can see who you are, and also to switch your cameras on during the Q&A session so that, you know, attendees can see who they can pose questions to. Just to say that we've had recent apologies from representatives of Anglian Water and the GCP, but they will answer any questions you have on the forum website later. So the plan is that we will have short Q&A sessions after each presentation for each development, and then a more general Q&A at the end of the evening. And we plan to finish at no later than 8 p.m. When it comes to questions, we'll do it in one of two ways. You can either put your question in the Q&A function on Zoom, and I'll read it out at the appropriate time, or you can use the raise hand function if you wish to ask your question live. But please, questions only, no speeches. We want to hear from as many people as possible, so questions only, please. If you do have comments, you can share them by emailing them to the forum email address, which we will provide at the end of the meeting. And one final thing before we move onto the meat of the forum, we would invite you to complete the online survey, which will pop up after the forum, which we will use to shape future forums to your needs. We're very aware that although the majority of people in previous surveys requested that tonight's forum was online, we know that there are a few that it doesn't really suit them, online forums, and we thank you for your patience on that. But we do aim to hold the October forum in a face-to-face format at a community space at Marleigh, and I think there'll be more about that in due course. Okay, well, moving on to the first speaker, and we have Chris Flood from Marshall Group Properties. He's actually standing in this evening for colleagues at Hill, and he may actually defer some questions to them this evening. But if I can pass over then to Chris Flood. Hello, Chris.
Thank you, Chair. Just one moment, I'll just try and share my screen. Hopefully everybody can see the screen. I'll just see if I can do. Yeah, here we go. Yes, thank you, Chair. Good evening, everybody. For those of you that have tuned into previous forums, this format will hopefully feel very similar, and I'll hopefully it will provide an update on the previous update at the last forum. So just as a starter, for those of you that may be kind of new to the Marleigh scheme, what you see on the screen in front of you is just an overview of the whole scheme. And this evening, we're going to provide an update on phase 1 and phase 2, which are both consented phases within the Marleigh scheme, which total 968 dwellings in total. But hopefully you'll be able to see my cursor, and I'll just orientate you around the scheme before I just go into the detail of the phase 1 and phase 2 updates. So just down at the bottom here is Newmarket Road, and what you can see, which is labelled number 15, is the petrol filling station on Newmarket Road. Hopefully that's a good indicator of whereabouts we are on the scheme. As I just move my cursor from kind of south to north on the screen, this is Marleigh Avenue. This is the main primary road into the scheme. And what's labelled number 6, you will see, is what we call phase 1A of the scheme. So phase 1 is split into 5 development parcels. Phase 1A being where my cursor is at the moment. And then as we move to the back of the scheme, 7 is development parcel 1B, and then 8, 1C, 1D, and then 1E, which is labelled number 10. So we have 5 parcels within phase 1 of the scheme. And then over on the right of the screen here, you'll see what we call the plains, which is where all of the sports provision is for the Marleigh development. We'll have 2 large full-size sports pitches and 3 junior pitches in the fullness of time, along with a sports pavilion, which is roughly where my cursor is here. And that will be accessed through what is currently the Hall Road, the construction Hall Road for the development, but in the fullness of time will be the access for the sports pavilion and pitches. And then right at the back of the scheme here, labelled number 11, is where the bulk of the allotment provision will come from in the scheme. And again, that there's a trigger for the release of the allotments in due course. That's linked to occupations, and they will then be released in phases across the scheme to allow all new occupants the opportunity to register for an allotment in the fullness of time. And then just coming back down into the main area of the scheme, number 3 here, and then the green space behind it. This is the new Marleigh Primary School. So this is a 2-form entry primary school that will be opening in September of this year. And then number 1 is the Jubilee Square, which I will come on to later. And I've got some pictures to show you of Jubilee Square. And number 2 is the hangar building, where the new community hall is provided to serve the scheme and the wider community. And then just 2 further highlights to point out. 16 here, which is the kind of dark greenish turquoise colour on the master plan here. This is phase 2, so we'll come on to talk about that as well in due course. That's 421 units, which we've just currently started to construct. And then finally, to the left of the screen here, labelled 17, this will, in the fullness of time, form phase 3 of the development. But what you will see currently at the moment is obviously the existing North Works, where you'll see the motor retail outlets along the front of Newmarket Road, and then some of the industrial hangars behind those motor retail outlets. So there's a period of there's a program at the moment of decanting those businesses in preparation for phase 3 in the fullness of time. Obviously, that being subject to a detailed reserve matters application in due course. So if I just move on to the next page, and here I've just summarised a couple of the key highlights within phase 1 and phase 2 of the schemes, just to give you an update on where we are. So as I mentioned on the previous slide, phase 1 will be delivered over 5 build phases, A through to E. And in summary, phase 1A is now fully complete and nearly all occupied. The phase 1B scheme, and for those of you that have walked or cycled through the scheme on the cycleway, you will see a lot of construction activity towards the back of the development now. So phase 1B is underway, which is the next 88 homes, and within that 88, 47 are private dwellings and 41 will be for affordable housing, and they will be handed over to L&Q, who are the affordable housing provider on both phase 1 and phase 2. And then phase 1C has recently started on site, and for those of you driving or cycling through the scheme, you'll have noticed that the next build parcel is underway, 1C, and that's for a further 86 homes. And as we see on the screen there, that's in early construction. With regards to the hangar building and Jubilee Square, I'll come on to some pictures later just to give you an update on some of the drone pictures that we've taken. We held a community event, the first large community event, on the 11th of June, a couple of Saturdays ago, which was a really successful event. We had over 300 people in attendance, and that was the first event where we were actually able to open up Jubilee Square to the community, and equally to open the doors on the hangar building so people could actually go into the new community hall and see what an amazing facility that will be for the community. And finally, on phase 1, it's just to note that the Kingsley Woods Bridleway route is now open and accessible to the public. And then just very quickly into phase 2, because obviously that's running slightly behind where the maturity of phase 1. We've recently we obtained detailed planning permission back in November, and in Q1 of this year we started construction on site for the phase 2 development, 421 homes. And again, just to note that we were very pleased that L&Q are the registered provider for affordable housing on phase 2 as well as phase 1. So I'm just going to move on to a couple of drone shots we've got now of the scheme, which really brings it alive. Now this shot is looking from the back of the scheme, and if you can see my cursor here, if you recall at the outset, I was pointing out phases 1A through to 1E. My cursor's on what will be phase 1D in the fullness of time, and this is looking back towards Newmarket Road. So you can see here, this will be the playing field for the primary school, and along here, along Gregory Park here, is the completed phase 1A element of the scheme, which is the first 150 dwellings which are now occupied. And obviously you can see to the right of that, this is the phase 2 land, which we very recently just started construction activity on. And if I move on, here gives you a bit more of a bird's eye view of the new Jubilee Square, where my cursor's hovering now. And this building here, this long building here, is the hangar building. Now, it's a split use building. So the first half of the building here, where my cursor's hovering, this is the community hall, which is obviously available to the community of Marleigh and the wider local community. And then as I move my cursor further down the building, this will be split between Monkey Puzzle, which is a commercial nursery provider, which are currently fitting out the lower floor, and on the upper floor there will be an office which we are currently looking to let through a commercial agent. And then sandwiched in between the middle of Monkey Puzzle down here in the community hall here, there will be a cafe, which again we are currently looking to let at the moment and hopefully get that open soon. And you can also see here, this is the private apartment block facing Marleigh Avenue, with the affordable housing block wrapping around the side here. This is affordable housing, and on the top here is a lovely shared podium garden for all of the occupants of the apartment blocks on phase 1A. And then actually over here is another good view of what we've just recently started on phase 2. These are just foundations for the first apartment block going in on phase 2 on the front here, which is behind the hoarding on Newmarket Road. And then I'll just move on. And again, another really good drone shot. So this is, if you like, hovering probably over the nearly over Newmarket Road, looking back towards the back of the scheme. So this is development parcel 1B, where my cursors are hovering here. And what you can see, which is following slightly behind in terms of construction sequencing, is phase 1C. Then I've just got a couple of shots to end on. So this was on the morning of the Jubilee Square community event. So this was a couple of vendors setting up on the actual square itself, and a shot of the actual community hall, inside the community hall. And then I'm going to finish on an actual shot of the event, which is lovely to see, with lots of people enjoying the outdoor space, which is what it's been designed for. And I think, yes, that's the end of the presentation, Chair. So happy to kind of take questions away, but equally hand over to Debbie from locality.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chris. What I plan to do, actually, I'm going to move straight on to Debbie Wildridge of locality, who's going to give us an update on the Marleigh community development, and then we'll take questions after that, if that's okay. So Debbie, can I invite you to make your presentation?
Thank you, Chair. I'll just share this with you. It would help if somebody could indicate that you can see this. I hope you can.
Yes, I can see it fine.
Yeah.
Okay, lovely, good. Thank you. Yes, Chris and I are topping and tailing this really, because we were appointed by South Cambs District Council to help support the development of the community in Marleigh. We're a national membership network supporting community organisations to be strong and successful, and we've got a 3-year contract to undertake this work. So the overview is we're here to link the new residents to existing services, address any gaps, and connect key partners. But we wanted to do that by providing an evidence base and a measurement framework, and I'll explain how we've managed to do that. So in the first year in particular, when there weren't a huge number of people occupying the site, we were very much concentrating on steering group and setting up connecting key partners and building the evidence base. I think Chris is probably slightly more up to date, but the last figures that I got was that 138 houses and 45 shared ownership flats have now been occupied. So we're now beginning to get a good number of people on the site. And we certainly know from previous work that we've done elsewhere, there are common issues for residents. For those, and it's interesting that in Marleigh, a lot of people have moved from somewhere else in Cambridge, but equally there are people who have come all the way from Southeast Asia. So recognising that there will be common issues for the residents, and we're very much looking at empowering the communities to mitigate against the challenges of living in a new development. We've got a lot of key partners. Some of them are mentioned there. The surrounding organisations such as Fen Ditton Parish Council at Tevisham and Abbey people on the East Barnwell estate were a key resource for us in the early stages before the building went up, or the buildings went up. And what we wanted to do was to do some sort of social sustainability work, finding out what was already in the area and how the people surrounding the site felt. Another key partner is the Land Trust. I think Chris might have briefly mentioned them. If not, they are going to be doing the ongoing maintenance of the open space, and they will be managing the community facilities. And there are a number of wider service providers. Obviously, Marleigh Primary School, which is going to be open in September, is a key partner for us, but secondary schools, health providers, travel coordinators, there's really a wide range that we're consulting with and bringing into Marleigh to see how we can knit all this together. So I mentioned the research and the evidence base. I'll put in the chat the link that you can see here. This is a publication which we commissioned from Social Life, and it's a report on basically what was there before Marleigh. We're going to repeat this in year 3, including the Marleigh residents, and we'll repeat it again in year 5, so that we can track the evidence of how well Marleigh has bedded into the surrounding area, but also how the residents are feeling in Marleigh. So the type of work which we've been doing, and particularly now we're able to get out and meet people. But right from the beginning, we've had a Facebook group. You can see there's 90 members of the Facebook group. I'm pleased to say that the community are using it themselves now. Everything from somebody had got some leftover soil and did anyone want it, to where do I find window cleaners? And the school has been very active using our Facebook page to advertise for staff, but equally to keep in touch with parents coming up to the opening of the school. We've also got a service directory which we set up, which is a resource particularly for those people who are moving into the area from elsewhere, and it's a live document. We are looking to both the partners and the service providers that we've got, but also the community themselves, to update that service directory and to keep it live. And Chris mentioned the events and the obviously this is pictures of as Chris had the day that the hangar was open. That's the school in the middle. They had a stand to talk to parents. We've also recently had a parent briefing evening, which the head undertook, and to the right is the people enjoying Jubilee Square. But in addition to that, we've had a coffee caravan run by Abbey people, which has come, and at the time we were using the car park in the sales and marketing suite. We used postcards to let everybody know that we were going to be there on a Saturday morning and to come along and have a chat with us. The first one was very successful. The weather was good. The second one was less so, because it was very cold and pouring with rain. But we've had probably 50 plus residents and their families come and talk to us at those coffee pop-ins. And one of the things on one of my earlier slides, I was talking about having some sort of legacy. We have a small community chest, which we are going to make available to groups, emerging groups, some small seed corn funding. We think it's likely that they will perhaps need money for a bit of equipment or some coffees and teas. So that will be available just to kickstart things off. We've got 12 volunteers who are interested in starting community activities, and we're meeting with them on the 16th of July. I'm expecting that some of them will be interested in dipping into the community chest, and I'm looking to keep that chest going by having contributions from, I think L&Q have said that they would be able to put a bit in, and we'd be looking for other people to make that contribution, because obviously whilst we can use it to set up some groups now, more and more people will be moving on site, and it would be good to have a bit of money for them as well. I've given an indication of the sort of things, the sort of activities that they might want to do, and they have actually at that Jubilee function, a number of people came forward with things like there's a very nice badminton hall, so I'm sure there'll be a badminton group. Toddler group seems to be very popular on Facebook, but also we're looking perhaps, if the community wants to do it, some sort of celebration of the nationalities, because there are a myriad of nationalities who are moving into Marleigh. Strong representation from Southeast Asia, from Eastern Europe, but also from the Mediterranean, and also from South America. The Land Trust that I mentioned earlier are going to make a bid for some heritage funding. I think we're all very conscious of the fact that Marleigh has got a tremendous history and connection with marshals and the airports, and so that's something that that we'll be working with the Land Trust on. And the school are very conscious of a theme that they want to establish in the community, so there is a strong sense of place. I think I'm going to stop sharing at that point. I know I've moved through that fairly quickly, but I think both Chris and I are happy to answer any questions that you might have on Marleigh.
Thank you, Debbie. I had a bit of problem unmuting then. Thank you very much. So far we have one question which I'm going to put, I think might be handled by Philippa, one of our planners. This question is from Councillor Graham Cone. At what stage will the new roundabout from Teversham onto Airport Way be delivered? He goes on to say, if there are a specific number of dwellings that need to be occupied before the roundabout is developed, what is the number? Due to delays during COVID and other emerging developments in the east, is it possible that the delivery could be brought forward?
So if I can answer that question, please. Hi, everyone. I'm Philippa Kelly. I'm the Strategic Sites Delivery Manager for Greater Cambridge Shared Planning Service. So the delivery of the new roundabout, it's triggered by the 650 unit threshold, and that's set in the associated Section 106 agreement as that was formed part of the outline planning permission for the Marleigh development. And that trigger, the threshold, was agreed as appropriate by the County Council's Highways team at that time. The delivery is based on trip generation arising from the development, and it's unlikely that it would be reasonable to bring forward the timings for the delivery of the roundabout, because there wouldn't appear to be any new circumstances to warrant a review of the delivery. So I hope that answers the question. Thank you.
Thank you, Philippa. A question for you now, Debbie, and I think we have a hand up as well, but I'll go to Claire Daunton, Councillor Claire Daunton, who's asking Debbie if you would say a little bit more about the functions of the hangar building. What's it going to do?
Sorry, I'll unmute myself. Yes, as I mentioned, there is a very nice badminton court. Upstairs there will be facilities for the Parish Council of Fen Ditton. They have a room upstairs, and the Land Trust have got their offices there, and we will be sharing a desk with the Land Trust. We saw at the opening of the hangar building that there is a nice reception area too, with sofas and an opportunity, I think, for some informal gatherings. I think that it's very much something which we are looking to the groups themselves and the community themselves to come up with the suggestions of what they would like to use that building for. And of course, we mustn't forget that we've also got the Jubilee Square outside as well, which during the summer months will be a very nice meeting place. In fact, people on the event that we had a couple of weeks ago, or rather that Hill had a couple of weeks ago, were very keen that there should be some sort of opportunity to be able to perhaps sit out in the evening with a glass of wine and enjoy the sunshine. Once the cafe is open, again, there will be a centre of gathering there. But in terms of what the hangar exactly will be used for beyond sports, and sports has already turned out to be a very popular activity of one sort or another. But we're looking to the community to come up with exactly what they would like to see.
Thank you, Debbie. Now, Councillor Naomi Bennett, you've asked to speak. Would officers please allow Naomi to speak?
Hi, I just had a very simple question, which is about the affordable homes being provided by L&Q. Could you take me through the numbers, and also are they all to be shared ownership, or will some be traditional intermediate level rentals? Thank you.
Who's going to take those? Is that Philippa again?
I'm Chair. I can have a go at answering that one if that's okay.
Right.
So the affordable housing provision for Marleigh is set at 30% as a headline rate across the whole 1,300 units, of which 70% of the 30% will be intermediate shared ownership homes, and the balancing 30% of the units will be affordable rent. So how that boils down into phase one, which is the first 547 units, I think that boils down to 164 units will be affordable housing. And then within phase two, which is the next 421 units, 126 of those will be affordable housing.
Thank you, Chris. Philippa, you have your hand up. Do you wish to speak?
Not intentional if I do have my hand up.
Oh, right. Okay, then. I think we've pretty much covered that one. I have a question here now from Councillor Carla Hoffman. Will there be any events to help both Marleigh and the Old Village gel as one community? Perhaps that's another one for you, Debbie.
Yes, the social sustainability report, which we have at the moment, identifies a number of issues, particularly for children and young people in the existing communities. I think East Barnwell is probably the best served of the three, but I think that the sports facilities will be very welcomed by the villages around. And I think that we will look at the sustainability report to tell us where there are gaps and how we can bring those, how we can address those gaps if necessary, and if possible, using Marleigh as part of that solution.
Thank you, Debbie. Carla, you have your hand up. Would you like to comment?
Unmute. Lovely. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hello, thank you. I think as I've been involved right at the beginning of this development, one of the concerns that the parish council had was that Marleigh is actually part of Fen Ditton. And what we would really like to avoid is that Marleigh is seen as separate from Fen Ditton. So I think what I meant with, you know, activities and events to integrate both the original village, shall we say, with Marleigh. I think we're reluctant to see it separate. For instance, when we come to the parish council, more than half of the people on the parish council will come from Marleigh. So we don't really wish to alienate the original village, and we also want to make sure that the history of the village is also looked at. The communications between the two of us are there, shared facilities and things like that. So although I think it's very important for Marleigh to, be well established as a community, there is already a community here that we need to integrate with that.
If I could just quickly jump in, if you don't mind, Chair. Yes, we're working very closely with Fen Ditton, and we regularly advertise the parish council meetings, the need for councillors on the parish council, and I know the school are particularly keen on sharing with the Fen Ditton school where they can on things such as organising joint outings and that sort of thing. So I think everyone is well aware, Councillor Hoffman, but there's always more work we can do.
Thank you, Debbie. Louise.
Yeah, just to add to what Debbie was saying, I think Fen Ditton have been well represented, and other parishes have been well represented at the coffee mornings, and we hope that will continue to be the case. And a key part of a locality's role is supporting groups, supporting the community as they start to identify what they need. So we'll also be very driven by new residents and the surrounding community about what they want, rather than us kind of imposing anything in particular on them, if that makes sense. Thank you.
Thank you, Louise. I don't have any more questions on this particular topic then, so we'll move on. And the next presentation, we have David Fletcher, Alexis Butterfield, James Goldstone. No, I'm sorry. Yes. David Fletcher, Alexis Butterfield, James Goldstone and Paul Keating of the developer team. I don't know who's speaking first, but would you like to kick off?
Yeah, thank you for the introduction, and getting all our names in the right order. James, did you want to just share your screen?
Yes, I'll do that now.
So just to introduce myself, so I'm David Fletcher. I'm a planning consultant from Stratton Parker, and we're acting on behalf of Bellway Latimer, who are the developers for the site. James, you wanted to move on to the next slide. But today we're going to do a bit of a whiz through on a number of different subjects, hence why we've got 4 speakers. I'm just going to provide a very quick planning overview, and then we've got Paul Keating, who's going to provide a bit of an update in terms of what's going on site at the moment. Alexis Butterfield's going to provide an update in terms of the design code process we've been through, and a very high level overview in terms of our infrastructure application. And James Goldstone is going to wrap up to provide an update on public consultation events that we did earlier on this year. James, we'll move on to the next slide. Firstly, just so everyone's clear in terms of where the site is, so we're to the southeast of Cambridge, immediately to the northwest of the site is Marshall's Airport. Access from Coldham's Lane to the southwest, and then Airport Way, Cherry Hinton Road on the east side of the site. Outline planning consent was granted back in December 2020. And since then, we've been working very closely with the Greater Cambridge Shared Planning Service and a range of consultees on a number of work streams. Next slide. This has culminated in us in May submitting the site-wide design code for submissions that's currently with the Shared Planning Service for determination, along with a Section 73 application which proposes some minor changes to the outline consent, a number of which we think are quite positive changes, particularly around enhanced energy efficiency of the dwellings across the site, and also responded to some minor changes to the parameter plans approved under the outline consent that were discussed as part of the design code process. Next slide. We're currently in discussions with the planners around infrastructure application, which is the next application that we're looking to submit on the site, and we're looking to submit that application, so it says here, end of June, early July, and then commence discussions after that in July on the first phase reserve matters residential application on the site, which will be for up to 400 units. We've also submitted a number of our planning conditions for discharge, a number of which have already been discharged, some of which are relating to the works that are currently being undertaken on site, including archaeology, which is a nice segue, I think, into Paul to talk a bit about what's going on site at the moment.
Yeah, thanks, David. Good evening, all. My name's Paul Keating, representing the LLP. To give you a bit of an overview of what we've been up to. So at the moment, we've been undertaking a number of surveys and site investigations. We've also, so the site investigations include ecology, ground investigation, topographical, and also unexploded ordnance. As you may have seen, we've driven past the site. Archaeology is progressing well on site. This is in advance of the gas main diversion, which will be taken out later in the summer this year. And also we've got some removal of contamination to clean up the site before we get going with works. We're also constructing a temporary access off of Airport Way for a haul road into the site to undertake these works. And again, the other thing you've probably seen on site is we're constructing our temporary project office, and that's going very well at the moment. We go on to the next slide, please. So this diagram shows sort of pictorially how we're proposing to construct the site. So the first junction we're going to be using is actually the consented junction 1, but we're just using this as a temporary, so we won't be forming the overall junction at this stage. We're just using a temporary access from this. So I'd say all construction traffic will come in through Airport Way rather than actually going through Cherry Hinton to feed the development. Okay, can you go to the next slide? Okay, so this gives you an overall feel for the site, and we're split into sort of 8 build phases, and obviously there's an infrastructure phase as well as the sales arena. Again, what we'll be doing here is constructing from both ends, so from the Cherry Hinton road end and also Coldham's Lane, and we'll be having a sales outlet either end and actually building from both ends. But again, we'll be feeding the whole site off of Cherry Hinton with the haul road going internally rather than from outside. You've probably seen this drawing as well, the primary school and secondary school noted on here. Okay, and that's it for me, really.
Hi there, Alexis Barterfield, partner at Pollard Thomas Edwards. We're the architects and master planners and for the scheme, and also just completed the design code. So essentially what the drawing you can see here is essentially sort of like hot off the press. It's exactly where we are right now in terms of thinking about the first of our reserve matters applications, which will be for the site-wide sort of primary infrastructure, the major infrastructure on the site, and that's going to be the street network and street trees and cycle routes along the primary street network, not all of the other streets, but just that. And then also associated with that is the main green spaces, where they're going to be also handling all of the sustainable drainage, which is incorporated within the landscape. So we're sort of having to sort of tie together all these different things in terms of those large green areas, which are the sustainable drainage and the landscaping associated with that, as I say, and then these routes through, which are the streets and the trees along those. The other thing that we're doing right in the middle of the diagram that you can see there, the green triangle area, is starting to design what's going to become the local centre. And the triangular area there you can see is the village green. We're also starting to design the hard landscape areas of the new market square, but none of the buildings at this stage. If we go to the next slide. So how did we get there? Well, what we've been doing is we've been working on the design code that underlies all of this for about the last sort of 8 or 9 months. And essentially that design code is a site-wide document. It's going to control the whole development and each of the reserved matters applications as they come forward, including this infrastructure. And it covers all of the landscape, public spaces, but also obviously the buildings and their layouts, the quality of those, street scenes, so actually just thinking about actually how buildings and streets come together, and finally, very importantly, sustainable design, and essentially how we make sure that these perform at a really high level. Next slide. To do that, we've been working with the government's new National Design Guide and National Model Design Code. Essentially, what that's really helpful for us in is that it means that we're able to cover a lot of different aspects of design. So not just building design, but also not just landscapes, but thinking about how these come together. The other thing that the 10 characteristics of a well-designed place, which is what those documents sort of focused on, is that they include things like the careful use of resources and also thinking about the lifespan of a development, you know, how it's managed and things like that. And again, that's something that we've really incorporated into the design code. Next slide. The other thing we've done is start to think about, say, how things really sort of interconnect together, and using the code to think about how landscape needs to relate to, as you say, the careful use of resources, how you move through the landscape and ways streets interact with landscape, and also how we make space for nature within all of that. And then conversely, thinking about buildings, not just building designs, but thinking about how they're used, how they're managed, and how they're made accessible. So coming from all of that, we developed a framework master plan. This framework master plan underlies all of the different diagrams which are set out within the code, and they just really help sort of put flesh on the bone, really, in terms of how things are distributed and where critical routes go, and also particularly green spaces. The emerging master plan also makes a number of kind of key interventions, I suppose, in terms of improvements on the original outline scheme. First of all, by making sure that there are a whole range of different interconnected green spaces that are throughout the development. Also making things like a traffic-free route, which runs from the secondary school right down into Cherry Hinton. And finally, just thinking about that more, really, make sure that we make good connections for walking and cycling to the surrounding area, and particularly to Cherry Hinton as we join on to the south side of the site. Next slide. This is a typical diagram from the design code, so sometimes quite dry, but what they do is they just really establish that framework I was talking about, making sure things like that green spaces link together to create these sort of natural and green corridors, so that we're able to sort of essentially you can move through the site always walking within green or tree-lined spaces. Next slide. And then those public spaces. So there's a whole range of different public spaces that are within the code. A lot of those are green parks, which, as I say, kind of centre onto each of the different neighbourhoods. There's quite a few of those. And then there's also this very important point in the heart of the development, which is the market square. And in the market square, we spend a lot of time thinking about how all of the different uses come together in different building types to create what we've called a family of buildings. And key to that is not just the architecture, it's thinking about the use of those buildings and how that use needs to be flexible and might change over time even. As I said, a lot of this is about street design, and the first thing really is we've thought about is streets as not just roads, but actually streets that are for people and space for people, as ensuring that we have tree-lined streets and that we prioritise those streets for walking and cycling. The other thing that we've done is think about how buildings relate to those streets, so how we can create focal points and things like that, and places for activity, so that as you come to a key place within the street, actually you can sit down, or there might even be a little bit of play, or just a focal point tree. The appearance of buildings is covered within the code, particularly thinking about how we can incorporate both the sort of traditional architecture of Cambridge and of the surrounding Cambridgeshire villages, but also really reflect on contemporary design within Cambridge, which is particularly strong. The other thing that the code does is establish a baseline of good quality materials and also sets out how they need to be used. And then finally, for me, a lot of the code focuses really on how all of this comes together to create a sustainable environment. So in this example of sustainable buildings, really sort of emphasizing things like moves like dual aspects, so making sure we're getting sunlight and daylight from all sides, making sure we're focusing on natural ventilation so people aren't forced to have sort of air conditioning or expensive fans, particularly as things get warmer in the future. It's a very warm day even today. And really all of that's about building in fabric first, what's called fabric first principles. So not relying on gizmos, but making sure that the architecture is doing the job. And we've used the code to make sure that that happens.
Thank you, Alexis. So my name's James Goldstone. We work for Connect. We've been supporting the joint venture with their community engagement. First thing to say is that the project team, the joint venture and the officers that we've been engaging with have been fully behind a comprehensive consultation programme as we move towards the design code, up to the design code submission and the reserve matters applications. So we have had in-person events, we have had ongoing dialogues and meetings with the parish district city councillors and meetings with stakeholders on request, and the feedback has been collated, and a lot of what we've done up till now has fed into the recent design code submission. And what we have here on the right is kind of some of the consultation activity events. I think this might be our third or fourth presentation at this committee, which is included here. So this is just the top line of what we've done. The feedback that we've received has led the project team to prioritise active transport over vehicles with generous landscaping, very biodiverse proposals and flexible public spaces. I'm going to go into a little bit of detail about some of the surveys that we ran in addition to the consultation drop-in events. So we've recently surveyed local residents and also made sure that this was shared out with local schools, making sure that we're getting a diverse range of voices. And these are just two of the samples of some of the thinking that came back from the community, which we're pleased to see was very much in line with Alexis and his team's vision, which is for good levels of public transport, cyclists and pedestrians over motor vehicles. And when it came to the neighbourhood squares, the overwhelming majority of respondents were favouring markets, with a small number for public art and other uses falling behind. But how the project team has responded to this is by emphasising low speed tree-lined streets, which Alexis has just detailed, and short loops to stop there being any cut-throughs, a network of green movement corridors and connected blue and green infrastructure. And much of the more specific recommendations are going to be fed into our latest proposals for reserve matters application, which we'll shortly be consulting on. So on that point, we'll be holding this is a picture of our event in March for the design code consultation. We envisage our drop-in consultation event to look quite similar, as well as a leaflet to over 10,000 local households, print media, social media, advertisements, and as well as meetings with amenity groups to go into specific details about what their needs are. We have a website, cherryhintonnorth.co.uk, and that has plenty of email addresses that have come in. People can sign up for a regular mailing list. We have over 4,000 individuals who have viewed us on the website, and also we are enhancing our construction updates for the community, linking into all that work that Paul was detailing earlier, making sure that people increasingly can hear about what's going to be happening on the site before it happens, and making sure everyone's informed on that front. And that was everything on consultation, and we look forward to answering your questions.
Well, thank you, gentlemen, for very clear presentations. I'm going to invite Rebecca Ward to speak now, and we'll take questions after her presentation. So, Rebecca.
Hi, Bill. Thank you. I'm just going to share my screen. Can you see that, Bill? I'm just checking.
Yes, I can see it.
Okay. There we go. Hi, yeah.
That's
hi,
great.
everyone. Great. Hi everyone, my name's Rebecca Ward. I'm one of the principal planning officers from the Greater Cambridge Shared Planning Service, and I've just popped my details on the screen in case you wanted to make any contact. I've been working on the scheme with my colleagues and the developer team probably for the last year. We've been working to try to build up the detailed planning application with the developers, and we're starting to see some of those applications coming through to us now, which I'll just give you a very brief update on some of the live applications that we have. So at the moment we've got what we call a Section 73 planning application in, which is seeking to make some minor material amendments to some of the outline plans that were permitted. One of the key changes is the slight rerouting of the primary route through the site to make to provide an enhanced village green / central area. So yeah, we do hope that's positive. And there's also some planning conditions that need to be slightly varied to take into account some of the updated proposals. So if you did want to review that, I'll pop the reference number here on the screen. We're going through the second round of consultation on this, and that expires on the 29th of July. We then review all the comments that we get in, and we're hoping to take this to the Joint Development Control Planning Committee to be determined in August. So this is some rough timetables there. We've also got in the design code, which Alexis took you through just a while ago, and I'll put the reference numbers here again. And again, we're hoping to take this to the Joint Development Control Committee in August to be determined. We have various other technical discharge condition applications which have either been approved or going through the process at the moment. So yeah, hopefully we can make our way through them. And I've just put a link at the bottom here to the relevant page on the planning website to review those plans. I didn't have much more to update apart from that, but if you do have any questions, I'm more than happy to take and answer them.
Okay, thank you, Rebecca. Thank you very much. Okay, now in this session we have one question from Mr. Ian Rawls, which is to do with water availability and sewage. What I'd like to do is to take that at the end in the general Q&A, because that relates to all of the developments, indeed all developments across the district, I suspect. So we have one question here. Given that the main area of the airport is to be redeveloped predominantly for housing, how will this current development connect with the future much larger development in terms of transport, drainage and other connections? Who would like to answer that one for us?
I think maybe if I briefly kick off and then I can maybe hand over to Alexis, if that's okay.
Right.
I think firstly to say, I think it's important to acknowledge that the airport only has a draft allocation within the emerging local plan, so that's obviously not guaranteed in terms of coming forward at this stage. But at the same time, we also recognise that it is a draft allocation and that there's a very good prospect that the airport will come forward in the future. That therefore what we've sought to do is to allow flexibility within the master plan and the parameter plans design code that we've drawn up to allow for future connections through to the airport if and when it does come forward in the future, particularly around having good pedestrian cycle connectivity from our site to the adjacent airport site. Alexis, I didn't know whether you might want to expand on that.
Yeah, absolutely. Pardon me, all of those things. I think the other thing that we've done in terms of putting a bit of flesh on that, in terms of things like designing the green spaces, particularly where they are adjacent to that long airport boundary, they've all been designed both initially at the design code stage in terms of the rules behind them, as David was saying, but also now thinking about the infrastructure application we're putting in. We're very much talking about them as something that at the moment is only sort of faced on one side by development, but eventually will relate to another side as well, and it'll become a slightly different place, actually more like almost like a linear park. So I think that that's something that we're very much thinking about. Then tied to that landscape design is, as David says, things like the footpath and particularly the cycle route infrastructure, which again very much makes sort of natural connections available up straight into that any future development to the north of it. And finally, just things like the primary street infrastructure, and this was, I think, actually true at the outline stage as well, is very much designed so that it can accommodate, if needed, some connections through from one to the other. But obviously that's to be determined, but it just doesn't stop that from happening.
Okay, thank you, David. Thank you, Alexis. We have a question from St Andrew's Church, Cherry Hinton. This question says, the original application for LNCH mentioned retirement housing, but we haven't heard anything about that. Has that sort of housing been dropped? And if not, what sort of retirement housing is being considered, and what thought has been given to intergenerational integration?
I can maybe kick off on that one as well. So yeah, absolutely right. So the outline consent gave an allowance for yeah, what they call C2. So yeah, either, you know, care home provision, extra care housing, if we wanted to provide it within the development. So it wasn't a mandatory. We have to bring forward sort of specialist residential accommodation, but there's an option to do it if it's considered that we want to do it as part of the development. And to be completely honest, it's certainly something that's still on the agenda from our perspective. But if it does come forward, it will be later on in the development. So our focus very much at the moment is on the first phase reserve matters application for the first 400 dwellings. If there's, I think we'll look at sort of further down the line whether or not to bring forward the extra care stroke care provision on the site, and we haven't made any firm decisions around that at the moment.
Okay, thank you.
Absolutely.
You'll be reminded in future meetings. Right, another question. I'm aware that there's one person with a hand up. I'll come to you in a moment. But there's a question here. The emphasis on active transport and cycling is good, but how will cyclists access the city centre and other areas? Coldham's Lane is very cycle unfriendly, and there are bottlenecks, like at the railway bridge. What thoughts been given to other transport schemes that are under development, and what would be the timing? Would new access routes be developed before the houses are inhabited? Again, is that one for you, David?
Yeah, I can have a go at that one as well. Yeah. So
okay.
So as part of the outline application consent, there was I think very detailed consideration given to obviously both what's happening within the site itself, but what's happening off site as well. So under the Section 106 agreement, because there's a requirement for us to provide substantial financial contributions to the Highway Authority to provide upgrades to particularly to different cycleways within proximity to the site, in particular focus on travelling south from the site to the Tins and into the city. Obviously the key strategy there is trying to keep cyclists as much as possible away from motorists, but there's also a number of other off-site cycleway contributions that we'll be paying to the Highway Authority for them to undertake works and upgrade cycle provision in the locality. I know I think Jez Tussell might be on the call as well. If he wants to add anything there, it might be a different team from Jez, but just to mention that.
Does Jez want to comment?
Sorry. Yes. Can anyone hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Oh, okay, that's fine. That's fine. Sorry, I've been having a hell of a lot of trouble with my Teams. Yeah, so we've got as mentioned, we've got some contributions towards enhancements to the tins, including the railway bridge. We've got enhancements to cycle links from the site to the Tesco store in Fulbourn. We've got enhancements to cycling facilities into Cherry Hinton itself, as well as a cycleway alongside Coldham's Lane to the railway bridge. Unfortunately, we couldn't divert it. We couldn't continue it under the railway bridge because there's simply not enough room to get cyclists under there at the moment. We don't have enough room. We thought about this long and hard, try and find a way to get a cycleway under there, and at the moment it's not possible. So cyclists would come down a special segregated facility alongside Coldham's Lane, then head north around, I think it's called Nuttings Road, and then cross Barnwell Road, and then they could then cross Coldham's Common onto the Chisholm Trail and into the city. So there are quite a high level of contributions towards walking and cycling and actually infrastructure itself.
Thank you, Jez. Okay, I have a question now, a raised hand. It's Councillor Carla Hoffman. Councillor Hoffman.
Hello. Now, I'm quite new to being a councillor, and as part of a councillor, I go to lots of parish council meetings, and I've noticed a couple of themes. And there's a very strong theme that always pops up, which is parents parking in roads not designated to them for dropping off their children to school. So I've noticed you've got a lovely big secondary school happening, and I've also noticed you've got a primary school in that situation. What facilities have you made to help the parents, which are coming from all over your area, to come to the secondary school and not go parking in your side streets, but actually do have somehow some way of dropping off their children, which they will do when it's raining?
I think I can I can help answer that, definitely.
Right.
So what we've done is, first of all, the design code essentially does try to encourage people to not drive the kids to school or to drive to school. I think the first thing is that certainly for the secondary school, we've created a new car-free route that links, as I say, from Cherry Hinton up to the school entrance, to really encourage people wherever possible to walk to school. I think the other thing is we've also made sure that the school and the road that we put into the school and the school kind of drop-off areas, it were, also include space for a bus stop, so we can have public transport going to the school. Because in the end, we need to be able to offer alternatives to people just driving. I think the other thing we do have drop-off space in front of the school. Yet to understand how that's managed, but that's in terms of spatially, that's there. And finally, we do have some parking as well, albeit we don't want to encourage a huge amount of parking, but of course parking just encourages traffic. So it's a knotty one, but that's our approach. In terms of the primary school, the intention is that that's much more feasible for people to be able to walk or cycle to that school. It's on all of both schools actually are on the main cycle routes, but particularly the primary school is really well served by cycle routes from a number of different directions. And it again has a bus stop right outside as well. And all of the new homes on the development are within about a sort of 5, maximum 10-minute walk of the school. So again, it's always about trying to sort of really offer alternatives that are a bit more healthy than just providing the parking. But I totally appreciate your point.
Okay, thank you. Related to what we've been saying about cycleways, as a follow-up question, has Nuttings Way been informed about a potential cycleway through there? Because there could be a problem for residents. There could be a conflict between cyclists and children playing on the green open space in the centre.
Hello there. Sorry, hopefully I'm back. Right. Okay. It's not going to be, we're not building a cycleway as such, so we're not going to be changing. It's just a quiet road that cyclists will be able to get through to get to the crossing on Barnwell Road. So we're not building a big cycleway across the green or anything, but it's just using existing highway infrastructure to direct cyclists away from the Coldham Lane Bridge. And I don't think there's going to be a, well, certainly not from this development, we don't think there's going to be hordes of cyclists going down there in the mornings and back in the evenings. I think it'll be more spread out than that. So I don't see any issues with cyclists using such a quiet road.
Okay. Councillor Dave Bagent, you'd like to raise hands?
Thank you.
To speak?
Yeah, thank you very much. I have taken that you can hear me. Perhaps you'll
Yes,
smile.
can. Yes.
Great. I want to talk about the cycleway as well. The response that you just gave really isn't adequate. This route will be taking lots and lots of cycles, especially as you develop out the sites. And there was the last application was almost turned down because of the lack of cycle route. And so I would suggest that you really take seriously the view that you are going to have to provide an adequate cycle route. Cyclists will not take that detour. It's not the preferred route. It's not the quickest route. They will continue to cross under the bridge, putting their lives at risk. Those people that would choose to go through the back street and across the main road are subjecting themselves to considerable risk because there's a huge flow of traffic down that road. So I'm really thinking that this is a very serious issue that needs to be taken on board. We need to get the people from these new estates onto bikes and not into cars. Very shortly, the probability is that people will find their routes into Cambridge disrupted. They will possibly be charged to drive into Cambridge, and they will be wanting to turn to cycles. Active travel is all in favour of cycles and buses and walking, and I think that, you know, this is not something that should just be passed off as, oh well, in the future or sometime, or people can use this alternative route. It is not an acceptable answer for a responsible developer. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I'm not going to ask anyone to answer that particular question now, because we've got plenty of other questions. But perhaps we could ask for a response to go on the forum website in due course. I think that's probably the best way to deal with that one. Okay, but it's a point well made, councillors. We now have Carla Hoffman again. Councillor Hoffman. I don't know if you can someone unmute her. I don't think she's
you're unmuted from our end, Carla, so you might need to unmute yourself your side.
okay. Well, look, she's clearly having some problems. She has put a question. No, it's not a question, it's a statement. Well, we can perhaps
Sorry, I'm here.
All right, yeah.
Oh, yes, with the increase of construction traffic, which has probably not been calculated into the increase of traffic on Airport Way, the roundabout that Teversham is asking for is going to be even more important. And again, in a lot of my parish council meetings, this seems to be a very hot subject in Fulbourn, Teversham, Stoke-on-Quay, I'm sure Cherry Hinton as well, that they are worried about the construction traffic. Is there any way that there could be some goodwill and move that roundabout date forward?
Who's going to respond to that one?
I think that I think that's one for Jez. I've already answered the question with regard to the trigger for the roundabout, the delivery of 650 units, and explained that in my view it wouldn't be reasonable without change of circumstances or justification. I didn't know whether Jez from the highways team wants to provide any more context to my position.
Yep, apologies, my things seem to be very slow at actually making me come up on the screen. With the trigger point at the moment as it is at 650 dwellings, the construction traffic is going to be far less than that in the peak hours. So as Philippa said earlier, I wouldn't be able to have any justification to say that that roundabout should be brought forward to cater for construction traffic. It's got to be borne in mind that construction traffic isn't a peak hour thing. It's throughout the day, so it's spread out, so there's no sort of specific peak impact, and the construction of a roundabout would really be dependent on peak impact, so it's not something that we could insist on. Okay,
another question related, which we're making you work tonight, Jez.
That's
another
all right.
question. Another question. How about making the whole of Coldham's Lane car free and make it a cycle route all the way from Cherry Hinton to the Beehive Centre? The only alternative to make this road safe for cyclists is to make it one way all the way along. That's a view. Have you got a comment, or is that one you'd like to think about?
No. I mean, that's an interesting thought. And we're currently looking at, as a county and with the GCP, looking at the road hierarchy in Cambridge, with a view to looking at the primary routes that we want traffic to be on and the routes where we don't want traffic to be on. So it's actually quite a pertinent question. And from this study process we're going through, that kind of thing might come out of that sort of process. We'll look at streets where maybe we think, well, actually, do we want cars going, or do we want less cars going down these streets? So it's an interesting question, probably one that's going to be more relevant as other developments in the area come forward, but certainly that's not out of the question, something like that, in the future, but we're talking long term now, not to the short and medium.
Thank you, Jez, and thank you, Paula, for an interesting question. I'm going to just allow one more question, and that is, how will the Tins rail bridge be replaced or improved if Network Rail don't agree for the work to be done? And they never have agreed for work to be done on it in the past. And we don't have Network Rail here, I'm afraid, no. So I don't know who's going to take that one.
It's probably me again. Okay, so our colleagues who are looking at the Fulbourn Greenway are in discussion with Network Rail over the bridge. I don't know the specific outcomes, but certainly the options we're looking at the moment are complete replacement or realignment of that bridge. So it's depending on what Network Rail's thoughts are on it. They haven't said, as far as I know, that we can't replace it. I mean, it's just replacement might mean we have to meet new standards, which might mean that we have to raise the bridge and put longer ramps on either side. But I don't, as far as I'm aware, think there's been a definitive no to replacement, because we're still looking at that as an option.
Okay, thank you, Jez. Right, there are a couple of questions and comments in which we won't cover now. One is about capacity at Addenbrooke's Hospital, which is another one similar to water and sewage that is more of a general question, and so we'll put that to the general Q&A at the end. Okay, so I'm going to move on now to an update on the land south of Coldham's Lane, and we have Steve Fraser-Lim, I hope, from the planning officer at South Cambs. There. Ah, great.
Hello, Chair. Can you see me okay? Hear me okay?
See and hear you fine.
Okay. I'll just bring up the presentation for this this site. Okay. So I mean, this is the site, sort of land south of Coldham's Lane. I'll just put it into presenter mode. So yeah, this is the site land south of Coldham's Lane. It's divided into 3 parcels. The planning application was submitted the end of last year for the redevelopment. So parcel A sorry, just go back a bit. So it's a hybrid planning application. So that means parts of the application are submitted in outline, and parcel A is the outline bit with the which is the sort of developed bit, and parcel B and C have been submitted with full details for the creation of a public open space. So for parcel A, it's an outline planning application, 31,400 square meters of commercial floor space, including B8 storage and distribution, and EG office, research and development, light industrial, and you can sort of see that there. The application is an attempt to address the reasons for concerns that were raised with the previous application that was subsequently withdrawn, and there's the main areas where it's different from the previously withdrawn scheme is there's a change to the mix of uses proposed. It's a reduction in the storage and distribution element, and with more business, sort of e.g. the office, light industrial, research and development type uses. There's a greater separation between some of the blocks and the adjoining streets, and the application also includes proposals to lower the carriageway in Coldham's Lane beneath the railway bridge to allow access for larger vehicles onto Barnwell Road and Newmarket Road. Just a bit of context in terms of the local plan. The site is identified as being an area of major change with potential for commercial development. It's also protected open space and a local nature reserve. And then this just shows the site-wide illustrative master plan. So you can see parcel A is the sort of developed, the bit to be developed with the new floor space, and then parcel B is going to be maintained to maximise biodiversity, and and then parcel C is the lakes, and that's going to be the new county park where with public access. This plan just shows the parcel A of the previously withdrawn application, and you can see the sort of location of the development blocks and their proximity to some of the residential houses around, and you can see the current proposal sort of brings those a bit further away from the surrounding kind of properties. And then you can see the bottom part of the site, the south, where there's a unit D, unit E, unit F. That layout there has changed quite a lot because that's where the more the office and research and development type uses are. But this is parcel B, so it just kind of just shows the going to be maintained to maximise biodiversity, and then parcel C with new pathways, seating, gates into the site, and then sort of increased management to make that suitable for public access. So the application was submitted at the beginning of end of 2021, beginning of 2022. A large number of public consultation comments have been received, a lot of concerns raised around the unsuitability of the proposed uses, in particular the storage distribution, impacts on air quality, noise, biodiversity, and in proximity to the adjoining sort of residential properties. There are also a number of comments received from the sort of statutory consultees groups such as Cambridge Friends of the Earth, Cambridge Past and Present, Cam Cycle, the Wildlife Trust, County Highways, and so on. So a number of concerns raised there as well about the kind of securing the public open space, future management arrangements and how long that's going to be for. Some further information requests in terms of the transport assessment and the drainage strategy, concern about the noise impacts and the suitability of the site for B8 use. And so the applicants are currently sort of considering all these consultation comments, and there are also discussions ongoing with Environment Agency around the kind of ground contamination aspects and what would, suitable remediation strategy for the proposals, and council environmental health officers have been involved in that, and they're just sort of generally considering the way forward for the proposals given the sort of strength of concerns, and then they, at some point in the future, unfortunately we just don't know yet when that's likely to be, they'll be submitting some revisions to the application, and when that happens there'll be full sort of round of neighbour consultation on any sort of revised proposals, and members of the public will have another opportunity to comment on the application. I mean, that unfortunately that's sort of all I can say really on the sort of status of the application at the moment, because the sort of discussions are still ongoing with the sort of relevant consultees and things. Informally, the applicants have kind of indicated that they would be looking to kind of change the mix of uses so that they're, in terms of kind of less of the kind of more contentious B8 type uses, but unfortunately, I just can't say for sure, because they haven't made any final decisions yet, but that's certainly something they're looking at, and once we know, when we know is when they'll sort of move to submit the formal revisions to the application, and then it will become much clearer for contributors for the application. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. Okay, so questions now for Steve. Some of the questions that are remaining are for one of the early sessions. We'll take those at the end. So yeah, any questions for Steve? Hold on. Yes, Landa, have we got one here? Why are the Anderson Group being allowed to propose some B8 storage units for last mile distribution when there is overwhelming community-wide opposition for building any B8 units on the site? There's huge demand for good quality laboratory space in Cambridge, which is now fetching in excess of £48 per square foot. Lab office units will be preferable to B8 logistics units. Is that something you'd like to comment on?
Yeah, I mean, I think the applicants have sort of proposed their mix of units mix of uses based on the policies in the local plan, and the area of major change policy does have some sort of text on the sort of types of uses that would be appropriate, and it doesn't really sort of specify no B8 or only B8, or what it says is that the site is suitable for commercial use, and that it may also be suitable for space intensive commercial uses, which may free up other sites in other areas of the city for things like housing and such like. So it does sort of give a suggestion that space intensive uses may be appropriate, whatever those are. But I think having submitted their application, they now know the sort of strength of feeling amongst the sort of local community, and I think they are reconsidering the mix of uses they're proposing given the concerns that are raised, and they are aware of the sort of potential kind of I think they are probably talking to people that may be prospective tenants in terms of kind of more office research and development kind of dry lab space, and they are actively looking at that, but they want to get to a sort of a more advanced place in terms of their conversations with the Environment Agency before they sort of press go with submitting kind of revisions to the application. So so unfortunately we just don't know yet whether they will kind of that they will definitely be going ahead with some changes and along the lines suggested, but hopefully they will, but
I don't think we have anybody from Anderson's here this evening, but perhaps well, Louise or Robin will correct me if that's not correct. But you know, any questions that directly for them, we can put to the forum website, I assume. Correct me if I'm wrong, Robin. Okay.
No, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Are there any other questions for Steve? Hold on. Yes, there's something here. Just bear with me while I read through it very quickly. Right. It's another comment on the B8 units, saying that heavy goods vehicles will be delivering to the site from outside Cambridge, running on diesel until late in the evening, and this level of exhaust emissions will expose Cherry Hinton residents, leading to poor health. It seems to me that this is this particular question is one that we will try and tackle online. Okay, we'll do it unless you feel the need to comment now, Steve. It's probably one to leave until the an answer online. Okay, happy with that? Yeah. And another question: why can't the local plan be changed to move away from industrial uses? After all, the site used to be protected for wildlife, but that use has changed. I don't know who could possibly. That's probably one for one for Philippa, or is that one that we should defer?
I think that's one to take away, bearing in mind
We'll
we
take
don't
that
have
one away.
anyone
Yep.
from the planning
Okay.
policy
Okay.
team here today.
We'll do that. Just bear with me. Right, another comment from Mr. Rawls. Why didn't the presentation mention that the site's former use was for domestic and industrial waste landfills? Do we know what's buried in these former landfill sites? Record keeping for that period were notoriously poor. We are led to believe that piles will be driven into the underlying substrate for building foundations. How can we be sure that these won't provide a route to the surface for contaminants from the landfills? Is it wise to disturb these sites at all? And isn't the least bad option to leave the sites undisturbed, but with continual monitoring? Another big question. Again, do you want to take that, Stephen, or would you like to reply?
Yeah, I can take that. Yeah, apologies. I should have mentioned the previous use of the site. So yeah, it was formerly, I believe, it was a former landfill site, and I know that, the application is submitted with a environmental statement, which does also sort of consider the past uses and ground conditions, and so there's quite a lot of information in there. And I know the applicants have also been doing a number of kind of trial trial borehole type excavations to kind of see what the condition of the waste is and so on, to inform their kind of their sort of remediation strategy. But I think it is a big concern, and we're Environment Agency is kind of looking at it closely, and they have their a special sort of team of people, as I understand it, who kind of deal with sort of these sort of former kind of landfill sites. So they are looking at it quite closely, and as are our environmental health people. And we will have but in terms of should it be left alone, it's an allocated site for development as an area of major change. So in terms of the sort of planning policies, they do support redevelopment. So it would be difficult for us to sort of take a position against that in terms of no development at all. I think any application sort of that is granted on the site will require lots of details to be submitted via sort of planning conditions in terms of the sort of remediation strategy, and the details of the construction, and the sort of the capping over the site to make sure that it's safe people, and also for the groundwater. I mean, Environment Agency are mostly concerned with sort of groundwater, whilst our environmental health people are more concerned with the sort of human health aspects of it. But it's been looked at as part of the application process.
Thank you, Steve. I did overlook one, and apologies to St Andrew's Church. The question is, I think it's rhetorical actually. Do you get the impression that Andersons are trying to wear down the public by requiring us to object over and over again? I don't expect you to answer that one, Stephen. We'll leave that. It's more of a statement, I think, than a question. Bear with me while I look. I've got a lot of questions, quite a lot of comments, which kind of make it difficult. Another question on the local plan. I will bring that out later. Right, question. Sorry, bear with me. There's a question, can you elaborate on plans for a country park?
Yeah, so that's sort of parcel C. So the two lakes. So the country park will be the lakes and the small areas of land around the lakes. And so the idea is that currently it's closed to the public, and the idea is that the development will provide the sort of funds to provide new pathways around the lakes, new fencing around the boundaries, and access points into the lakes, other sort of facilities, cycle parking, and as well as kind of more some sort of landscape management improvements. So sort of doing whatever needs to be done to manage the trees, and bringing and the kind of landscaping around the edges of the lakes. And then the development will also provide an endowment for for a management company to maintain the lakes in the future. I think the application details suggested that for a 25-year period, and that's been raised as a number of concerns. And I think the applicants are looking in perpetuity, so the development will secure that sort of public access and those improvements, and in the long term. That's the intention.
Okay, Steve, thanks. I think that's all of the questions for you specifically, but we do have, oh sorry, no, there is one more. Will the management company be able to secure the country park on a 24/7 basis? A question from Darren.
As in sort of access on a 24 hours.
That's the question. Will the management company be able to secure the country park on a 24/7 basis? I suspect secure and secure it, monitor entrance.
I'm not sure at the moment about what the arrangements are for sort of night time, and whether it would. I would suspect that it would be locked at night, because I know antisocial behaviour has been a sort of an issue around the lakes, and the intention is, if it was to become publicly accessible, then that may make it sort of a bit of a less of an attractive location for people to try and get into. But I would think it would. I think I'd need to check with. I don't think it's necessarily been decided yet, but I'm not sure it would be open 24 hours. But certainly the idea is that it would be ongoing public access, in perpetuity, as a publicly accessible open space.
Okay, Steve, thanks. The other questions that I have now are really more general, so I just thank you very much, Steve, for your presentation. So we can now, I will now open the questions up, more general. Now, there was one question that was posed quite early on from Mr. Ian Rawls, which is, given Cambridge is currently over abstracting water from its underlying chalk aquifer to the tune of millions of litres a day, where is the extra water coming from for all of the developments? Additionally, how is the resulting sewage going to be dealt with, seeing as untreated sewage is currently discharged into the Cam during periods of high rainfall? A really big question. Philippa, I think you're prepared to give us a general answer anyway.
Yeah, certainly I can and have a go at answering this question. So for all the consented developments which we've been talking about today, which were allocated in the local plans, water resources and foul and surface water drainage issues were all carefully considered at the outline planning stage. Issues were considered as part of the land north of Cherry Hinton development and found to be acceptable. With regard to foul and surface water drainage, it was acknowledged that enforcement work would need to be undertaken to the foul water drainage system and strategic water mains, and that's going to be carried out by the developer. And with regard to the matter of water resources and the land north of Cherry Hinton site, the 2019 Water Resource Management Plan included demand from the land north of Cherry Hinton development, the local plans allocated for development in the Water Management Plan. Cambridge Water confirmed at the time that the outline planning permission was being decided that sufficient potable water resources would be available to serve the site. The outline planning permission does include provision to secure reductions in water main use through water efficiency targets. So I hope that's a good enough answer for you.
I'm sure that the questioner will put a comment, and maybe we'll have to take that one and answer on the forum website. Okay, we have a number of comments about the bridge for the tins thing. I'm not sure whether or not we can expand more on that this evening, but we'll certainly take those questions away and give an answer on the forum website. Another question from Councillor Hoffman. With all the large building projects in the area, will there be any plans for large green spaces to connect them for all people to enjoy? Who'd like to take that one on?
I think, again, that's probably a wider question for the local plans team, but as far as the actual consented allocations are concerned, there is a provision for informal and formal open space provided as part of those permissions. And I think the sort of the wider issues of wider connectivity may be related to sort of the future use of other land and the airport land, which is sort of an emerging proposal in the new joint local plan. But that'll be something that needs to be taken forward as a part of the evolution of that particular plan. Certainly strategic connectivity and more strategic infrastructure and open space is going to be obviously fundamental to that plan making process as that develops in due course.
Thank you, Philippa. A little bit related to this is another question. The point about the use of these parcels of land is very important. Things have changed since the 2018 local plan, and we also now know much more about the sites. We need more green space in the area, and this large part of land could be hugely valuable for the existing and new developments adjacent in the future for a range of leisure and community activities. Can the council look at this more carefully? Is that one to take away?
I think it's one to take away. I'm not entirely sure what reference to this part of land is. Is that the wider Cambridge East? And I think, you know, we need a little bit of clarity about what site is being referred to, because obviously...
Right. Well, the question was asked at 7:35, so it was during Stephen's question time. Perhaps it's that one that we should in south of Coldham's Lane. Mm-hmm. I'm afraid I can't help you any more than that.
Okay.
No, go ahead.
what I would say is that the 2018 adopted local plan does provide for the development of that site and includes the provision. So what you'd be looking for is the development proposals to come forward that accords with that local plan. I think, you know, it's a question for the planning policy team as to whether in the future they will be looking at revisiting that allocation, and if so, you know, what changes might be made. But I think at the moment we've got to base our considerations and our views on what the allocation and the local plan policy says at the present time rather than the future. I think it's probably something that might be useful for a local plans officer to come to a subsequent meeting of this forum, maybe answer some more questions.
I think it would. There's quite a lot of questions on related to that, which I'm attempting to take together. Let me go down a bit further. There's another comment on water supply. Who on earth found that water supply was acceptable, and how was this judged? Water efficiency measures cannot possibly make up for the millions of litres of over abstraction, let alone additional demand. Cambridge Water cannot currently supply adequate water without damaging the Cam and its aquifer. Where exactly is this extra water coming from? I think we're getting onto the territory of fen reservoirs and things like that, aren't we?
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, I recognise that this is a particularly sensitive issue in the region. The reference to acceptability in water supply terms, I was referring to the consultation responses that were received at the time of determination of the outline planning applications for the land north of Cherry Hinton site, and that was a response from Cambridge Water, which did set out quite clearly the acceptability of those proposals in terms of water resource terms. So, you know, that's what we have to take into consideration when we're making our planning decisions. We need, if we're going to deviate from any decision regarding the acceptability of a development with regard to its impact on water supply, we need the evidence. But if our consultees are saying that it's acceptable in planning terms, then we have regard to that advice, and which was what we did at that time when the outline planning permissions were granted.
Okay. Just going back, I'm not sure how we take this. There are a number of different questions and comments, excuse me, on the you know, the road bridge under the land. Yeah, that was the north of Cherry Hinton, wasn't it? I wonder whether the way to do it is to answer them on the forum. I'll take your advice. Can I take the advice of officers on that? I can take them through, but they're very much related. Talking about, you know, bridges too narrow for cars and bikes, big lorries, it's dangerous. Number of comments, very, very similar. How do you want to play it? Would you like me to ask the questions individually, or would you like to answer them on as collectively on the forum? Who can answer that for me? Is that Louise or Robin? Sorry?
So I'm quite happy to answer them individually or as one.
Are you? All right.
Yes.
Well, we'll do what we can. We have 10 minutes left.
Okay.
All right.
That's fine.
By far the most questions are to do with this. Okay. So I'm going to go back to them. Lowering the bridge doesn't work as we have more domestic traffic and the bridge is too narrow to cars and bicycles. I can't even imagine with big lorries. What's a realistic plan for safety, cycling or walking to the city centre, and who's going to pay for it?
Okay, so lowering the bridge is a short-term solution to what Anderson want to do. To avoid their lorries going through Cherry Hinton, we've said, well, we don't want them going through Cherry Hinton either because it's not suitable. So the only other route is through Barnwell Road, which is a bigger road. They've come up with the solution of lowering the bridge so that the lorries can get under it, because at the moment, if they tried it, a lot of the bigger lorries would have their roofs taken off. So they're looking in the short term to actually facilitate their development. In the longer term, the GCP and the county and the combined planning authorities are looking at a big strategic set of interventions which will actually bring people into the city, such as the Fulbourn Greenway, other passenger transport corridors. So it's focusing on the bridge is probably not the best way of looking at this. It's about how we're getting all the people in, trying to take them away from Coldham's Lane and get them onto the tins. So the enhancements to the tins, the enhancements to other routes coming forward. Secondly, we've also got to be aware that the new local plan is coming forward, and with that new local plan comes more development and the opportunities to actually do even more for cycling and walking. Potentially, let's say if the Marshall site were to go ahead, then something major could be done at that bridge. You know, we don't know. That could be, you know, possibly rebuilt. I mean, you know, everything is possible at the moment. So, you know, you could actually get walkers cycling under there. You might close Coldham's Lane and reroute the lorries. I mean, it's a long-term thing, but you've got to remember that their short-term fix to the bridge is only to get their lorries where they want them to go. And it doesn't take into consideration anything that the county or the GCP or the combined planning authorities might want to do 10, 20 years down the line.
Okay, we have a question from Sue Wells.
Hello. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
I just wanted to clarify. I asked the question at 7:35. Sorry, it came out as anonymous. I just wanted to clarify. I was referring to the allocation of the land south of Coldham's Lane. I do fully understand, of course, that it was allocated for commercial development, and that is what the Andersons' proposal is for. But we do now know a lot more about this particular location, and we're now seeing the impact of all the other developments going on around it, particularly north of Cherry Hinton, particularly the land north of Coldham's Lane. And I think, you know, it was difficult at the time that local plan went through. The consultation on that was actually back in 2016, if I remember correctly. And we weren't really aware at that stage of how little green space there was going to be. With the pandemic, we are now very aware of how much we need public open space, and we need space for communities, all the things that have come up in the discussions today. We've seen also how the transport network isn't really working. These cycling questions were so important, and that's a big issue too for land south of Coldham's Lane. And to the question, could the council not step back a little bit and look at what was proposed for this area and perhaps reconsider some of this? Because I think many residents can see how this area could be, I use the word develop, not in the sense of delivery hubs and houses and things, but how it could be used so that it would really benefit the community. Thanks very much.
Okay, thank you. I think that's, I wonder if you are the same person who's asked a number of other questions as an anonymous attendee. Possibly not. Okay. I'm really trying to pick my way through these questions now, and many similar ones, which I'm trying to avoid duplication. There's a question about going back to the lakes. How will opening the lakes up make them safer? They are currently closed to the public on safety grounds. I don't know if that's one we can take now.
I can answer that.
Yeah.
So I think there are some issues around sort of because it's fenced off and it's a bit of a, you know, sort of a forbidden place that has a certain attractiveness because it's, you know, because it's sort of forbidden. And so I think, you know, sort of young people do go there, but the general feeling is that if it was sort of publicly accessible but managed, then that would reduce its sort of attractiveness in some ways. You know, there are other examples of kind of lakes where they have been opened up to sort of public members of the public. I think one of the examples when they were looking at the management plan is Needham Lakes, which is in in Suffolk, about a sort of comparable example. And also I think there are some improvements that can be made that will make it safer. So for instance, I think there's some quite big sort of cliffs in some areas, and the improvements can regrade that so that it's sort of not so steep, and there's less of a kind of a falling in risk if there's more sort of gradual banks to it, and also the sort of pathways and things. So and will need to be actively managed, I suppose, as well, in terms of sort of people being coming down to check on how the space is used and so on.
Okay, thank you. Another question, the idea that a development company can do a master plan for a city wildlife site and a country park is seriously flawed. International best practice, and even in the UK, is that plans for such areas are developed with stakeholders. Will the council reconsider the approach that is being taken? Okay, is that one that I don't know, is that one for you, Steve, or Philippa?
Yeah, sure. I think it's something to, as I understand it, the applicants are sort of working with others to develop the proposal. So I think the sort of angling group is also currently there. So I know they've been there's been sort of input from them. But it's something I can take away to sort of discuss with with the applicant about how much they engage with other groups. I think they are they are definitely sort of open to it. I don't think they would see them as sort of just doing it on their own as without kind of listening to anyone else. But they're still kind of working out the kind of detailed management arrangements of that, so we can continue to talk to them about it.
Okay. Okay. Right. Who bears the responsibility of failures to deliver on promises? The person said, what happens if the site's developed as per Anderson's plans, but in practice fails? Lakes have to be shut for safety, for example, or Coldham's Lane is gridlocked. Who bears responsibility for this? Planners, I guess.
In terms of the lakes and the sort of management, so that we'd be looking to secure the the management arrangements as part of the legal agreement, as part of any planning permission. So the developers will have kind of legal obligations to do what it says in the agreement in terms of the sort of management arrangement. So if they were to sort of not do what they've said that they're going to do in terms of public accessibility or the kind of management, then they would be kind of responsible, and the council could take legal action against them to kind of make the site become accessible.
Okay, I think it's another one for you. There's a general move to relocate industrial land out of the city. In 10 years' time, sorry, things keep jumping around, makes it hard for me to read them. In 10 years' time, industrial use on Parcel A would have to be moved further out anyway. Why not be forward thinking and keep the industrial uses out of Cherry Hinton?
Yeah, I mean, it's the applicants are aware of the kind of the pushback during the public consultation and the concerns around the use, and I think they're considering it, but that we just don't know for sure at the moment. I think what the applicants did say is that they would, once they've kind of made decisions on how they're going to change their application, they would like to be able to come back and present to the forum, with their sort of detailed proposals at that point. So
okay.
They can.
Look, I'm going to draw the questions to to an end now, because there are quite a few questions, but they are all pretty much related to what's already been covered. And what we will do is we'll take the questions away, and if they haven't been dealt with, they will be dealt with in the forum replies. So I hope you're happy with that. So that does bring us to the end of the meeting. As I said, that further questions, feedback and comments can be sent to the forum. Just bear with me. Can be sent to the email address cambridge.east@scambs.gov.uk. That will probably appear on the screen shortly. I hope you'll take a couple of minutes to complete the survey that should pop up after the meeting ends as well. Many thanks to all of our speakers and panelists, and to you for attending and engaging with us. Certainly sparked some lively questions, and I hope you found the meeting useful. The recording of the forum will be available, I am told, within 10 working days. This gives the people who are dealing with questions times to respond. Okay, so please also see the forum website for details of how to join the mailing list to get news and updates to your inbox. The next meeting is to be held on the 19th of October, and I believe it's going to be a face-to-face meeting. But sadly, one of our organisers of tonight's meeting, Robin Kerrigan, won't be with us. She's leaving the council for Pastures New, and I'd like to thank her for all of her efforts on our behalf and all the work on the forums. The good news, though, is that we have Gemma Adams stepping in to take her place, and so welcome to Gemma. So that's all for now. Thank you all for attending, and I wish you all a very good night.